can I ask you something before we begin? What if the most powerful step you could ever take to lower your cancer risk after 50 had absolutely nothing to do with pricey prescriptions, complicated procedures, or anything your physician has likely already mentioned during a rushed appointment? What if the answer was so quietly obvious that nearly everyone walks right past it? And what if the research backing it up has been sitting in medical journals for years, calmly proving what a handful of cancer specialists have understood all along? Stick with me, because over the next few minutes, I'm going to share something that genuinely transformed the way I speak with my own patients, and I truly believe it can reshape the way you look at your own health from this day forward. I'm Dr. Adriana Markson, and I've spent more than 20 years working in the field of oncology. I've sat face-to-face with thousands of people, I've delivered the kind of news no doctor ever wants to give, and I've spent endless hours wrestling with one nagging question. What could we have caught earlier? What could we have changed sooner? And the deeper I dug into the evidence, the more often I found myself circling back to one subject that hardly ever gets the spotlight in everyday health discussions. I'm talking about chronic inflammation and the remarkable role it plays in the development of cancer once we cross the age of 50. Now, before that word inflammation makes you tune out, please stay right here with me, because what I'm about to share is going to completely reshape how you think about it. When most folks hear the word inflammation, their minds jump to a twisted ankle or a scratchy throat. Something painful, something you can see, something that passes. That kind of inflammation, what we call acute inflammation, is actually working for you. It's your immune defense doing exactly what nature designed it to do. You scrape your knee, your body sends in the troops, bacteria gets cleared, tissue gets rebuilt. That's gorgeous biology in action. But there's a second variety of inflammation, and it's far more dangerous precisely because it does none of those obvious things. It doesn't puff up. It doesn't ache. It just sits inside you, smoldering quietly year after year, like embers in a fire you can't see and can't feel. We refer to it as chronic low-grade inflammation, and here's the part that should make every person over 50 pay close attention. The latest research reveals that this silent inflammatory state is one of the most powerful forces driving the start and the spread of cancer that science has ever uncovered. Let me give you the actual numbers, because this is where things get serious. A major paper published in Nature Reviews Cancer reported that chronic inflammation plays a role in roughly 25% of all cancers around the globe. Another large analysis, which followed more than 100,000 adults, discovered that people with elevated inflammatory markers, in particular something called C-reactive protein, had noticeably higher rates of colorectal, lung, and breast cancer over a 15-year stretch. 25%. Sit with that for a moment. In a world where 1 out of every 2 men and 1 out of every 3 women will hear the words "you have cancer" at some point, that figure is staggering. So why does this happen? Why does inflammation create the perfect soil for cancer to take root? Here's the science, kept simple. Your cells divide millions of times each day all throughout your body. Most of the time, your DNA copies itself with incredible precision. But when chronic inflammation is present, you also have ongoing oxidative stress. Your cells are essentially being soaked in unstable molecules called free radicals, and these can damage DNA right in the middle of that copying process. When that damage piles up and isn't repaired in time, mutations form. And given enough time and enough errors, those mutations can lead to the runaway cell growth we recognize as cancer. But it goes even deeper. Chronic inflammation does something even sneakier. It dulls the performance of your natural killer cells. Those are the immune cells whose entire purpose is to roam your body, spot abnormal or precancer cells, and wipe them out before they can settle in. Picture them as your personal security patrol. When inflammation stays cranked up, that patrol gets sluggish and less reliable. And that's the moment when the door swings open for cancer cells to slip past unnoticed. Now here's something that catches most of my patients off guard. After the age of 50, your body naturally tilts toward a more inflammatory state all on its own. Scientists actually have a name for this. They call it inflammaging, a blend of the words inflammation and aging. As the years add up, the immune system grows less balanced. It releases more inflammatory messengers called cytokines, and it loses some of its ability to calm inflammation back down once it gets going. Your habits, the food on your plate, the hours you sleep, the stress you carry, all the things you might have shrugged off in your 30s, start stacking up in ways they simply didn't before. The rules of the game shift, and most people have no idea the rules ever changed. So, what is this simple method I mentioned at the start? What is the most evidence-backed step I personally recommend to my own patients for cooling down chronic inflammation and lowering cancer risk? It's a Mediterranean-style anti-inflammatory eating pattern, paired with one specific daily habit that most people are either skipping entirely or doing the wrong way. Let me start with the food piece, because the research here is honestly overwhelming. A massive European project known as the EPIC study, the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition, followed over 500,000 people across 10 different countries for more than a decade. And what they found was crystal clear. People whose meals leaned heavily on bright vegetables, beans and lentils, whole grains, olive oil, fish, and nuts had dramatically fewer cases of several cancers than those eating a typical Western menu loaded with packaged foods, refined sugar, and red meat. Dramatically fewer. In some categories, the drop in risk was 30 to 40%. Why does this style of eating work so well against inflammation? Because every food group inside it carries compounds that interrupt the inflammatory chain reaction at the molecular level. Take real extra virgin olive oil. It contains a substance called oleocanthal that works in much the same way ibuprofen does. It blocks the very same inflammatory enzymes, except instead of swallowing it as a pill, you're pouring it over your salad each day. Leafy greens like spinach, arugula, and kale are packed with folate and protective antioxidants that guard your DNA while your cells divide. Fatty fish like salmon and sardines are loaded with omega-3 fats, which research has repeatedly shown reduce circulating levels of inflammatory messengers like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, two of the main players in chronic inflammation. Then you have berries. Blueberries, strawberries, raspberries. They carry anthocyanins and resveratrol, two powerful plant compounds that have been studied specifically for their anti-cancer activity. A paper in the journal Cancer Research demonstrated that resveratrol can actually disrupt several stages of cancer development, from the very first spark all the way through growth and spread. These are not their findings. This is solid, peer-reviewed work appearing in some of the most respected medical journals on the planet. But here's what I tell every single patient who walks into my office. Changing what you eat is powerful, but it isn't the full picture without addressing what I consider the most underappreciated cancer prevention habit available to anyone, and that is steady, moderate daily movement. I'm not asking you to train for a marathon. I'm not asking you to live at the gym. I'm talking about 30 to 45 minutes of moderate movement every single day. A brisk walk, a swim, a bike ride, whatever activity you actually enjoy enough to keep going. And the reason this matters so deeply isn't just about burning calories. It's about the remarkable shifts it triggers in your body chemistry, right down at the cellular level. When you do moderate aerobic movement, your muscles release proteins called myokines. These are signaling molecules that calm inflammation throughout your entire body. Exercise also lowers circulating insulin and insulin-like growth factor, both of which, when chronically high, build a hormonal climate that helps cancer cells multiply. The American Cancer Society, in their most current guidelines, named physical inactivity as one of the most important changeable risk factors for cancer, ranking just behind smoking and obesity. And yet it remains one of the most ignored pieces of advice in everyday medical practice. Here's a number that stopped me in my tracks the first time I read it. A large review published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that people who hit the recommended movement guidelines had a 20 to 30% lower risk of colon cancer, a 20 to 30% lower risk of breast cancer, and significantly reduced risk of endometrial and lung cancers compared to people who barely moved at all. 20 to 30%. From walking. This isn't a theory. This is settled science. Now let me pause here and speak to something I know some of you might be thinking. You might be saying, Dr. Markson, I already know I should eat better and move more. None of this is news. And you're right that the headline isn't new. But here's what is new. What's different about what I'm sharing today isn't just that these habits are good for you in a general sense. It's the actual mechanism. It's understanding that you aren't simply trying to drop a few pounds or feel a bit lighter. You are actively, measurably, and biologically lowering the inflammatory environment inside your body that allows cancer to take hold in the first place. When you see it through that lens, when you grasp exactly what's happening and why, your motivation changes. Your consistency changes. Everything changes. There's one more piece I can't leave out, and it's the one my patients consistently underestimate. Sleep. Specifically, the depth and the length of your sleep after 50. I want you to understand this clearly. While you sleep, your body carries out the cellular cleanup and repair work it simply cannot get done while you're awake. Your DNA repair enzymes hit their peak activity during deep sleep. Your immune system regroups and strengthens its defenses. Your body even flushes out metabolic waste through a system called the glymphatic network, which only fully switches on while you're sleeping. And here's what the science is telling us. Long-term sleep deprivation, meaning regularly getting fewer than 6 hours a night, is tied to significantly higher inflammatory markers and weaker immune surveillance. A study in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute even drew links between short sleep and increased risk of colorectal and breast cancer. 6 to 8 hours of restful sleep is not a luxury. In the language of cancer prevention, it is medicine. So let me pull all of this together, because I want you to walk away from this video not just informed, but truly empowered with a clear picture of what you can actually start doing today. After the age of 50, your biology shifts toward chronic inflammation. That inflammatory environment damages DNA, weakens your immune patrol, and creates the perfect setting for cancer to take root. The research on this leaves no room for doubt. But you have 3 powerful, evidence-supported tools that work right at the source. First, an anti-inflammatory eating pattern that puts colorful vegetables, beans, olive oil, fatty fish, berries, and whole grains front and center, while pulling back on processed foods, sugar, and too much red meat. Second, 30 to 45 minutes of moderate movement every day, enough to spark those anti-inflammatory myokines and quiet the hormonal signals that feed cancer growth. Third, 6 to 8 hours of solid sleep, giving your body the nightly repair window it needs to keep your DNA stable and your immune system sharp. None of this requires a prescription. None of this requires expensive supplements or some breakthrough therapy. It just requires understanding your body well enough to give it what it actually needs at this stage of your life. And that is exactly what I'm here to help you do. I have watched patients in their 60s and 70s make these changes and seen their inflammation markers fall dramatically in just 3 months. I've watched people who walked into my office convinced cancer was their fate because of family history walk back out with a completely new sense of how much power they really hold over their own future. Your genes are not your destiny. The environment inside your body is something you have far more say over than you've probably ever been told. If this information meant something to you, I need you to do one quick thing right now. Tap that like button. It honestly helps this channel reach more people who need to hear this message. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I share new videos every week covering evidence-based health and cancer prevention topics that your doctor likely doesn't have time to walk through during a 15-minute visit. And if you have someone over 50 in your life who would benefit from understanding this, please pass this video along. The greatest gift any of us can give the people we love is making sure they have the right information at the right moment. In my next video, I'm going to reveal why one of the most popular breakfast foods in America is quietly raising inflammation in millions of people who genuinely believe they're eating well. And I'm going to show you exactly what to swap it out for. You won't want to miss that one. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I'm Dr. Adriana Markson, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay well.